My name is Jonathan Reed, and I have always been an enthusiast of folklore and ancient traditions. I found a strange comfort in the eerie and the macabre, something that drew me like a moth to a flame. This fascination led me on a chilling journey through the world's creepiest festivals, where I discovered that some legends are frighteningly real. It all started in the fall of 2020. I had just finished my master's degree in anthropology and was yearning for an adventure. I decided to travel through Europe and Asia, documenting festivals that celebrated the darker aspects of life. My first stop was the famous Samhain Festival in Ireland, believed to be the origin of Halloween. The locals told stories of ancient spirits walking the earth, and the air was thick with the feeling of something old and powerful. But this was just the beginning. The true horror was yet to come. Ireland's Samhain was a mesmerizing introduction. The festival, held on October 31st, was a vivid mix of fire rituals, costumes, and storytelling. One night, I wandered into a remote village in County Meath, where the celebrations were more traditional and intense. The villagers wore animal masks and lit bonfires, believing the flames would guide spirits home. I was invited to a local's house, where I heard tales of the Slough Side, a host of malevolent spirits that roamed the night. An old woman, her face lined with age and wisdom, warned me. They say the Slough Side can steal your soul if they find you alone. Keep a piece of iron in your pocket to ward them off. Laughed it off, thinking it was just an old wives' tale. That night, as I walked back to my lodging, a dense fog descended. I felt a cold, unnatural presence behind me. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. When I finally reached my room, I found an iron nail in my pocket. I hadn't put it there. The thought of the Slough Side haunted my dreams that night. Next, I traveled to Mexico for the Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, celebrated on November 2nd. The festival was a vibrant blend of colors, music, and ofrendas, offerings for deceased loved ones. However, beneath the surface lay an unsettling reverence for death. In the town of Mixquic, the atmosphere grew somber at night. Graves were adorned with marigolds, candles, and sugar skulls. I joined a local family in their vigil, listening to their stories of encounters with spirits. One man told me about La Llorona, the weeping woman, who roamed the rivers and canals at night, crying for her lost children. He claimed to have heard her wails and warned me not to wander near the water after dark. Curiosity got the better of me. That night, I found myself near a canal, the air thick with mist and the scent of marigolds. As midnight approached, I heard it a mournful wail, rising and falling with the wind. It chilled me to the bone. I fled, my mind racing with thoughts of La Llorona. My journey then took me to China for the Hungry Ghost Festival, held on the 15th night of the 7th lunar month. The festival was a stark contrast to the vibrant celebrations in Mexico. In the city of Fengdu, known as the Ghost City, the atmosphere was oppressive. People burnt incense and joss paper, making offerings to appease restless spirits. One evening, I was invited to a Taoist ceremony. The priests performed rituals to communicate with the dead and guide lost souls. The air grew thick with the smell of burning paper and incense, and I felt a profound unease. Suddenly, the priest's voice changed, becoming deeper and more guttural. His eyes rolled back, and he spoke in a language I didn't understand. Later, a local told me that the priest had been possessed by a particularly vengeful spirit. He warned me to be careful, as the boundary between the living and the dead was thin during the festival. That night, I dreamed of ghostly faces and cold hands reaching out for me. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. Opon Festival, Japan. Japan's Opon Festival, held in August, was next on my list. This Buddhist event involved honoring the spirits of ancestors, with lanterns lit to guide them home. Travel to the town of Aomori, where the Nobuta Matsuri was in full swing. Giant lantern floats, depicting warriors and mythical creatures, paraded through the streets. However, it was the quiet, intimate ceremonies that held the true sense of the festival's purpose. I participated in the Toro Nagashi, a ceremony where paper lanterns were floated down the river to guide spirits back to the afterlife. The sight was serene, yet eerily beautiful. A local monk told me about the Hitodama, ghostly fireballs that appeared near cemeteries and rivers. That night, as I watched the lanterns drift away, I saw them small, glowing orbs hovering above the water. They moved erratically, as if alive. My camera failed to capture them, and the locals refused to talk about it. The next day, I was left with a sense of awe and dread. Taipusam, Malaysia. My final destination was Malaysia for the Taipusam Festival, celebrated by the Tamil Hindu community. The festival, held in January or February, involved extreme acts of devotion, with participants piercing their bodies with skewers and hooks. The intensity of the festival was overwhelming. In Batu Caves, near Kuala Lumpur, I witnessed devotees in trance-like states, carrying heavy kavadas, burdens, up the 272 steps to the temple. The air was filled with the scent of incense and the sounds of drums and chanting. One night, I was invited to a private ritual. The devotee, his body covered in piercings, entered a deep trance. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, and he spoke in a voice that wasn't his own. He told me things about my past that no one could have known. The priest later explained that the devotee had been possessed by a spirit, drawn by the intense energy of the festival. I left Malaysia with a sense of unease, feeling that something had followed me back. In the sleepy village of Abbotsbury, Dorset, nestled deep within the ancient Blackthorn Forest, there existed a legend whispered only in the shadows. It was said that once every 100 years, during the peak of the crimson moon, a ritual was performed by the keepers of the old ways. This ritual was said to bring about untold horrors and dark, supernatural events that left the village cursed for generations. The crimson moon was an astronomical event that turned the moon a deep, blood-red color. It was rare, occurring once in a lifetime, and coincided with the night of the winter solstice. The villagers believed it to be a bad omen, but none could have imagined the true terror it heralded. It was on such a night that young Eliza Thornhill found herself walking through the deserted streets of Abbotsbury, Dorset. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the silence was broken only by the distant howls of wolves. Eliza, a curious and adventurous soul, had always been intrigued by the legends surrounding the crimson moon. Her grandmother, Agnes, had been the village's historian and had told her many tales of the old rituals and the dark forces they summoned. Agnes had warned Eliza to stay indoors on the night of the crimson moon, but her grandmother's warnings only fueled Eliza's curiosity. She wanted to witness the ritual for herself, to uncover the secrets that had shrouded Abbotsbury, Dorset in mystery for centuries. As she ventured deeper into the forest, Eliza came across an ancient stone circle, partially hidden by the thick underbrush. The stones were covered in strange, room-like carvings that seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly light. In the center of the circle stood a large, flat stone altar stained dark with what appeared to be old blood. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest as she hid behind a nearby tree, peering out to watch the proceedings. She didn't have to wait long. From the darkness emerged the keepers of the old ways, hooded figures draped in black robes that seemed to absorb all light. Their faces were hidden, but their presence was undeniably menacing. The leader of the group, an imposing figure with a staff topped by a carved raven's head, stepped forward and began to chant in a language Eliza couldn't understand. The other keepers joined in, their voices rising and falling in a haunting melody that seemed to make the very air around them vibrate. As the chanting grew louder, The crimson moon reached its zenith, casting an unholy red glow over the forest. The runes on the stones began to glow more brightly, and the ground beneath Eliza's feet started to tremble. She watched in horrified fascination as the leader drew a dagger and approached the altar. From the shadows, two more hooded figures emerged, dragging a struggling man between them. He was gagged and bound, his eyes wide with terror. Eliza recognized him as Aiden, the blacksmith's son, who had gone missing 3 days prior. The keepers forced him onto the altar, and the leader raised the dagger high, its blade catching the moonlight. Before Eliza could scream, the dagger plunged into Aiden's chest. Blood sprayed across the altar, and the chanting reached a frenzied pitch. The ground shook violently, and a dark, swirling mist began to rise from the altar, taking shape in the form of a monstrous, shadowy entity. Eliza felt a cold hand on her shoulder and turned to see her grandmother, Agnes, standing behind her. "We must leave, now," Agnes whispered urgently, pulling her granddaughter away from the stone circle. "What is that thing?" Eliza asked, her voice trembling. "The Dark One," Agnes replied, "the malevolent spirit that the keepers summoned to grant them power. But it comes at a terrible price. We must get back to the village before it's too late." As they fled through the forest, Eliza could hear the screams of the keepers behind her. She dared not look back, but she could feel the oppressive presence of the Dark One pursuing them. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches clawing at their clothes and skin. They burst out of the forest and into the village, slamming the door of their small cottage behind them. Agnes quickly bolted the door and drew symbols in salt across the threshold, muttering incantations under her breath. Eliza watched, her heart still racing, as her grandmother worked to protect their home from the dark forces outside. The night seemed to stretch on forever, with strange noises echoing from the forest and an unearthly glow illuminating the horizon. The villagers cowered in their homes, praying for the dawn to come and banish the horrors of the night.